What's up, everybody? Soul here with another video for your viewing pleasure, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Q&A that Thomas Mahler and Kevin Jordan did from Moon Studios in reference to No Rest for the Wicked. We'll go over it quick, hit each one. I'll give a little bit of my opinion as it is. We go over it, and yeah, just bear in mind, none of this are direct quotes, so much as just my interpretation of what they said. If you want to check out the video, make sure you go do so. They streamed it on Twitch. With that said, first up, question number one is, what are some of the upcoming changes we've discussed or haven't seen yet? And so they said, right up, co-op surprised them with all that it took to get it done. They have a lot more to add before 1.0, but they're steadily working towards them. They've been honing in on how loot and challenges work. The scribe table was one of their biggest changes. So they didn't really say what we haven't seen yet. They're more or less kind of give a roundabout answer. It's kind of political, right? You know, so they don't want to give us that information just yet. But yeah, that's question number one. Next, we got, did anything surprise you in the co-op beta? And so Kevin responded first, and he said that he was surprised at the faster gameplay and the better loot and how players were enjoying that. And then Thomas discussed the progression of the game and being surprised how many players would have an item with lots of really good enchantments or enhancements, and that when they'd add an enhancement or they'd get a new enhancement that was bad, it often led to the player completely abandoning the item. He was really surprised by that. And then Kevin discussed how he had a lot of experience working with like Diablo 1 and how they mentioned timetables and upgrades and how that was a big target for them. And so I think what he's alluding to there is he's saying that he was surprised at how the upgrades system was progressing in co-op. And then he went on to say that he really struggled to find a sweet spot where players would find new equipment, but they also weren't overwhelmed by the amount of new equipment they got. He said he's put a lot of effort and energy into that. So it was really interesting. They'd ask a question. They kind of had like the preset questions. They'd go into answering it and then kind of just wander off down the path and just talking about the game. So I really urge you to go watch it and check it out if you're really interested in some of the behind scenes things on this game and its development. The next question they addressed was, what about player feedback surprised you the most? And so Kevin responds with the compliments on the art style and level design. He goes on to say that it is a tremendous act of, work and art to craft these levels. He said that he has a lot of appreciation and craftsmanship in this way, and he's really put in a lot of effort. Thomas goes on to discuss how an action RPG, the environments and the levels are usually procedurally generated, but that they handcrafted their levels to have different random effects in those levels instead of giving you those procedural levels. That was a really big deal for them. They wanted to have those levels handcrafted, really beautiful. They wanted that to be a mainstay of their game and to really be seen. And he felt that that was a unique approach for No Rest for the Wicked. So that was an interesting response there. And then the next question is, what did the co-op beta prove to you? And so Thomas responds to this one, and he explains how it overall justified everything that they were doing. It grounded that they were doing the right thing in this game and its development. Player feedback was overwhelmingly positive, he said. They said that the scribe table was something they were a little concerned about initially, but that it overall was very well received. And Greg discussed how, by Greg, I'm sorry, I mean Kevin. Kevin discussed how it brought a lot of new players in for the co-op, and then that really wanted to have that experience, and how multiplayer is usually shallow in other games, but that they've created a dynamic where players have a deeper experience in co-op play. They went on to collectively, as in together, discuss social engagement, where their desire to create is more meaningful co-op experiences with players rather than just giving them that shallow experience. They mentioned loot and how it plays a big role in this, and how they referred their system as old school in that it's first come, first serve. And so they really enjoy that aspect, and they felt that players enjoyed it too based on their feedback, and in that it creates a social dynamic where somebody might take all the loot and not want to share it with the others, and then it creates a conversation, and it more or less doesn't feel like it's 4 individuals playing a single player game together. It's a sincere multiplayer game or effort where you're really playing with those friends, and the consequences and the merits are tangible, they're real. The next question they ask is, what is the biggest change that came from player requests? And so Kevin just outright says timers and fast travel. And so Kevin discussed how they added and refined resources to the game to help disguise timers, because timers were something they were starting to move away from. And so that seems like it's a mixed bag according to the both of them. Thomas and Kevin both talked about timers and how players wanted them, but that they didn't, and so on and so forth. And so refined resources were like a way of adding a timer to the game. That a timer as in like a limitation of what you can do within a certain amount of time. So you can't just, speed run it at easily. And yeah. And then they said players are more accepting of those limitations when they're disguised in this way. And so as long as they're getting to work with a new resource, and they're more or less content and happy with the limitations put in front of them. And then Thomas discussed how he put his foot down on timers, and a lot of people were telling him to get rid of them, but he refused to get rid of them in its entirety. And that he wants No Rest for the Wicked to be a world with its own rules. He even goes on to say that he really wanted the time tables to be the same as what we experienced in our reality, like what's seen in Animal Crossing. That's a direct reference he used. And he said that they haven't quite met that, but that's what he wanted, that's what he envisioned, that's what he would like. But, he thinks it creates a lot of player limitations, and so they've moved away from that for now. And so that's a really interesting thing there. Once again, I'm not directly quoting. Make sure you go check out the video, and you'll see it for yourself. The next question is, why should new players choose now to join No Rest for the Wicked? And then Kevin comes in with one response, basically co-op. He said co-op is the biggest reason. He goes on to discuss how they keep adding new content, such as how deep the loot system is now with this next update, which is true. It's going to be it's not just co-op that's being updated. It's definitely the loot system's getting a revamp. We're getting a research system, which he goes on to describe. And then Thomas drops a bomb on us right here. He tells us that No Rest for the Wicked is going on sale with this update. And so not only is it going to go on sale, it's going on a 40% sale. It's almost half off. On top of a 40% sale, we're going to be getting a free weekend so that your friends can try the game with no money down and see what they think about it. He does go on to say that this is a one-time deal. They will never offer the game at 40% off again, or at least that's not their plan, and that they also will never give a free weekend again. So really good big news right there. Make sure you go check out the game. If you're interested and you're watching this, or maybe you're not sure about it, or maybe you just want to go wait for it to go on sale, this seems like this is the big sale for No Rest for the Wicked, and that free weekend, if you want to try it and you got your doubts, it's there. So this is really, really a big deal. And then he talks about how, in the future, No Rest for the Wicked will actually move up in price. It will become a full price game. So I imagine that's going to be somewhere like $60, $70. I don't know. There's no direct quote on this. There's nothing said about that. He just says it will be a higher price. And then, of course, that's going to be when it releases at 1.0, according to Thomas. And the game will also be available on all consoles. That is what he says. Not a direct quote, but that is what he says. So make sure you go check that out. And then he says that they're utilizing early access to polish their game as much as possible, but that it will be basically launching on all consoles. And he references Baldur's Gate 3 Larian Studios and how they took this approach and how he thinks it's the right thing to do. Really, really big news there in that one right there. Next, Thomas goes on to prompt the next question, but instead of asking the question, he instead chooses to kind of start to talk on a matter and then prompts Kevin to do the same. And so what that is it's Twitch drops. I believe the question probably was about Twitch drops, but he more or less says, now I'm going to start talking about Twitch drops. He said this leads to the discussion of cosmetics and microtransactions. Thomas describes his distaste for microtransactions. And then he asks Kevin to weigh in, and Kevin goes on to say that he doesn't like microtransactions either, and that they're engineered to make money and it's distasteful. He explains that game development is an art and it compromises the integrity of a game to add microtransactions. He then discusses an auction house feature that is being utilized in other games, and he talks about how it can rob the joy from a game and game experience. He says it did work in World of Warcraft, but doesn't work in Diablo. And he said Kevin, and then of course we're still talking about Kevin. Kevin goes on to discuss how cosmetics and microtransactions basically just rob game experience through fairness. And so basically, people can jump on the game, open up their wallet, and have all the best stuff without putting any effort forward, whereas other people might grind for hours, and yeah, they might get less gear or still not have the equivalent, or there's even times when game developers will inherently make farmed gear, let's say farmed gear, worse than the pay-to-win gear or even cosmetics, because they want that extra incentive, they want that extra money, and so it can compromise a game in its entirety. And then he finishes it all off by basically saying that gaming is supposed to be a fair and even platform for all people based on their effort. And so he says, we really don't have fairness in reality, in real life, and so that's where games are there, and that's what they're there for, is that we go and we can have a nice, fair experience no matter who you are, where you're from, and that's how it should be. And so I really thought that was well put by Kevin. Next question is, at what point are you happy with a game? And what does the final success look like to you? Both Kevin and Thomas take turns kind of describing how, with no rest for the wicked, they're taking risks to deliver an art piece of a game. And so it seems like that's their end goal. He says, they both do, their goal is to deliver a game that is authentic above all else. Kevin discussed how it's a passion, his passion is to create a meaningful game experience between players. And then Thomas went into detail about how, as a game studio, they're pinching pennies and avoiding money-making schemes like microtransactions to deliver an amazing product. He often referenced throughout all of this Baldur's Gate 3, and he even referenced Mario 64, discussing how they had such a passion for their project that they ended up reaping huge rewards for staying authentic to their work. And so he says that's his goal in all of this. So we definitely are seeing a lot of speaking out against microtransactions and for authenticity of the product and game that they're creating. So that's really, really interesting, big stuff right there. And then the next question we get is, will you add more weapons? And so Kevin says that our art team is making weapons faster than the programmers and so on can implement them. And so the answer is yes. There's a large backlog of weapons ready to be added to the game, but they can't keep up with the amount of weapons that are being introduced and suggested. And so there's more coming. Long story boring. And then Thomas chimes in, no, there will not be firearms. So there will not be any firearms, no rest for the wicked, period, dot. And that is a Thomas quote. It's not going to happen. And then the next question is, what's going on with the Endgame? And so Thomas kind of briefly hits this one. He says he says he doesn't want to add too much to the early access because it will ruin the experience of 1.0 at release. He even references Hades 2 and talks about how players had so much access to things in the early access that when the game launched, they felt like they were robbed of anything new and that they didn't have a great experience because of that. And so Thomas does not plan on adding anything tremendous for Endgame or even telling us about it because he wants us to be enthralled at 1.0. So that is definitely his take on that. Of course, he talks about, for the second time that he is currently playing a version of the game that is closer to 1.0's version. So he mentions this numerous times, like I said, and at this point it's the second time he says it. And so that gives you the illusion, or the impression, I should say, not the illusion, the impression that this is a game that's nearing its final stages of development. That's my assumption, and that's my impression based on what he's saying, but he keeps referencing this point that he's playing a game that's further along, months ahead of the current early access and what we are seeing and what we're getting. And he even talked about how this co-op release is really hard to weigh in and talk about because it's so far behind where they are in development. So that's really exciting information. It makes you believe that 1.0 is around the corner, it's coming, and it's happening, especially when he's saying things like will not be on sale again and so on. So it feels like they are moving into the final stages and we're about to get a release here coming up. The next question is, do you feel the game is too hard? And so Kevin starts by explaining that he hasn't used parry in the game in months. Instead, he hits, times his dodges, and hits again. No parrying at all. He then goes on to explain that the tough thing about creating a game like this is that you're catering to not only casual gamers, but also professional gamers, and you have to find the happy medium. And so, in essence, not a direct quote here on this part, but he's more or less saying that he feels like it is not too hard, that he didn't have to parry anything, he just dodges. And so there are different ways to play. You can figure it all out. He doesn't feel like it's too hard, but that it's really difficult to create that game that caters to all audiences and its combat difficulty. So that's his response there. The next question is, do you have an ETA for 1.0? And then the answer from both of them is yes. Thomas goes on to say, we're not going to announce it yet. We will be using all of our channels to announce it, so make sure you pay attention to that. It'll be something similar to this. So when they announce 1.0, we will see it. It'll be announced through their Discord that they're going to have this announcement and this, that, and the third, so we will know well in advance. And then the next question is, what has been the biggest challenge in game development? And so Kevin answers this one. He discusses how it's creating a great game while meeting players' needs. He goes on to describe how the impact of player reviews really hurts or helps a game's health. And then he says that game development is a bit of a democratic process, and that it can hurt the vision of the game to cater too much to player demands or requests. And so it's really, really a hard balance to serve there when you have a vision of what you're trying to do. And so that's really interesting response there on that. He's trying to create a game they are trying to create a game that's inclusive to everybody, but also isn't limiting on what their vision is for the game. The next question is, what is the plan for post 1.0? And so Thomas comes in with this and he says expansions. He says that they have several expansions planned for after the game's release, and that will fuel the players' needs as far as content. So that's really exciting. They already have expansions being worked on and in place and in concept. So they already have these things ironed out and laid out. So they're going to be releasing them. Good to know. That's what we have to look forward to with No Rest of the Wicked is expansion. So there's probably going to come in the form of like DLC and things like that. Really, really nice. Next question is, any wipes coming? And so a wipe is basically when everything is thrown out the window and we start all fresh. From the bottom, we lose our characters, you name it. And so Thomas goes on to say that there will be a wipe, and the next wipe that he can foresee is 1.0. And then he goes on to explain that players who are playing in early access will get a reward for all of their efforts in playing in early access. He does not talk in detail as to what it is, what it'll look like, and in what shape, form, fashion it comes in. He just simply says that their efforts will be rewarded, and that's his goal. So playing early access is going to reap you something. I don't know what. And then, 1.0, everybody's getting a fresh slate to start off of. And this also lends to the belief that 1.0 is on the horizon. It's coming. It's right around the corner. So really, really big news and information here. This is super duper awesome. We're about to get this co-op update. It's about to drop as of the time of this recording. This Q&A just ended here just a little bit ago. I'm going to start editing this video and get it out to you guys. And let me know what you think. Drop down in the comments and tell me all about it. What are you excited about? What are you hoping to see? These guys are paying attention. They're watching their Discord chat, so get on there and holler at them. They're watching the YouTube videos, so get on here and just tell it in the comments and talk about it. They are paying attention. And so this is fantastic. They definitely have their ear to the ground. They're worried about the player base and creating a fantastic, authentic experience for everybody to enjoy. I'm really liking what they're doing here. This is a phenomenal thing. This is going to be a massive game. There's just no two ways about it. So huge shout out and thank you to my soldiers. I'm deeply grateful to you guys and gals. You guys and gals are the ones that make everything possible. So thank you for your support. And until next time, guys, I will catch y'all later. Bye.